Hey, how's it going? It's been a few days since I've made any videos. Like I said, I had to upgrade my studio and my computer and everything else. But what I'd really like to get into today is psychological warfare because it plays such a bigger role than what people realize, and that's part of the goal of psychological warfare is not only creating super divides, but also doing it in a tactical way where people don't realize that their strings are being pulled and that they're being nudged in specific directions. It's very similar to reverse psychology. You know, if you want someone to do something, like your kids or something, then you tell them the opposite and they'll do the opposite of what you say, which is exactly what you wanted them to do. I know some people who do this, and they do this to friends, to people they know, or they're they're manipulators. Sometimes it's called for because sometimes if you want to have a positive influence on your kids, you definitely don't want to hit them or anything. Um, I definitely believe in um, lines of respect, and sometimes like dogs and different things do need to be put in their place because they don't understand language and the complexities of um, certain structures psychologically, and that's why people are now trying to pretend that there's no alpha of packs of dogs and stuff. I hear this new wave of science coming out, but there are certain things that you do know, and people have to realize the nuances of how the mind works, and this is with any animal, um, especially the human species, because the human mind is so complex in so many different ways. And I really think it's important for people to understand that they might not be as in control as they perceive they are if they're unaware of what goes on around them. And the more and more time goes on, the more they have psychologists and psychiatrists on TV that help write these programs and help the writers and cinematographers and all these different elements create the production that ends up being the show. I haven't watched TV in 20 years. This marks the 20th year that I haven't watched TVs, shows. I boycotted Disney when I was 15. When things like Netflix and stuff started coming out, I realized that it's all just designed to try to entice you, and they use situational means in order to control the minds of the population. And sometimes this is when they try to make you feel like you're being left out of something, because humans naturally have an instinct to want to be part of the group. This is also a tactic that the left tries to use when it comes to ostracizing. And it's not always just the left, because everything does have nuance, but it's mostly on the left. But it can be found in all sorts of different groups of people and situations, and people who are either psychologists, psychiatrists, um, manipulative people, people with certain um, behavioral traits, whether they're considered, alpha or whatever. And it's really important to understand how you are the product of your environment, especially when you're growing up. When you're growing up, your mind wants to reach for everything that it can, even things that are beyond the reach. And that's when the mind is susceptible in so many ways, and many stages as you get older too. I think it's really important to think about the complexities of how the mind works. And not everything that you do in life is just because you want and because you decide to. A lot of these things are tricks, and that's the whole purpose of commercials as well as television shows and books and anything designed by somebody, for the most part, or a large part anyway, is a potential for convincing somebody of something. One way to really get around this, and the same thing is true with subliminal messages. That's why some countries subliminal messages are illegal, because it's a real thing that can really be implemented. It's not some made up, sci-fi kind of nonsense. It's an actual thing. And we're getting to the point too where human brainwaves are being and thought patterns and certain sectors of the mind are being mapped out, and it's an exponential thing as it goes on. The human brain is by far the most complex thing in the entire universe. By far, the most complex thing in the entire universe. And people that are born, they don't come with manuals on how to use this incredibly complex thing. It used to be where humans were in a very limited environment, but so many things have changed to the point where even human behaviors have changed over the generations, and especially with certain recent phenomenon, like how the angstful youth can be turned against their parents. That wasn't always the case. Families used to be much tighter, much, closer together, especially the further and further you go back, because it was not only essential, but it was vital in order to stick together as a team. Families are kind of like teams, and you should want your family to progress as far as possible, because that's how your team can end up becoming triumphant over other adversarial teams, which can be, beasts and animals and cave dwellers that are found in the dark that will challenge your mortality. The teams that can gather the most food were much better to survive in, harsh environments. That's one of the reasons I think that places where seasons are prevalent, you see advancements in technology greater than advancements in places that don't have climates that change so differently. And that has nothing to do with the intelligence of humanity, but also the resources available and how scarce resources can be, and how dire of a consequence it becomes if you can't harvest those resources for your advantage, especially in increasingly dangerous environments. And it's important to note that, because I think that's one of the reasons why especially the European culture was able to advance technologically so far, because it was all done out of necessity. Necessity is the mother of invention. That describes it precisely. So there always had to be ways to challenge people, groups, tribes, and the mentality in order to survive. And that's found everywhere. Nothing is equal either, because as you go across the land, you see different things in different places. That's how the earth was formed. Not everything is uniform. And one of the psychological weapons used by the left in particular are to tell people that everything is supposed to be equal, and it's certain people who have kept the equality away. And that's just used in a weaponized way, because not everybody understands or realizes the complexities of the planet, geography, the weather, economics. And economics doesn't just have to do with money at all. At one point, it was just the scarce resources, as I just said. Everything is, in some sense, I don't want to say a war zone, but many things need to be fought for if they're not used in teamwork. And that's why you want families to stick together because of teamwork, and teamwork is success. You know, you can be much more successful if you work as a team. But there's adversaries to how things work, and these people are out for control, and they're out to control people's minds, and they want people to be divided, and they want people to split up, and so they can be easily conquered, because these people are the same ones that I'm talking about, who are working behind shows and the technology in a lot of ways that are designed to grab onto your mind and your brain and keep it in place while things move past around you. Um, like this is something that came to me when I was younger, and this is in part how a Tic Tac poster kind of completely changed my life, or at least in a lot of ways. And I stopped watching TV, like I mentioned, when I was about 15 years old, because I saw how incredibly brainwashing and how much of a grasp that it had on people's minds and behaviors. And I saw how a lot of it was being used to target children. Um, not too long before that, I was a child, and there were many things that I saw when I was a child on TV that made me go, who's behind this stuff? Who's making this stuff? Who's telling me what I need to buy and what I need to use? And all these weird and strange products of all sorts, many of them made sense, and it was pretty logical, and a lot of them you could tell it was just designed to try to make money as a selling device, and hopefully there would be people that were dumb enough to listen and to buy these things. And one of the good things about capitalism and supply and demand is most things that don't work end up drifting away by the wayside and falling out. And that's especially so when people aren't brainwashed into such a mode where they feel like they do have to buy these things or particular things. And that's when I think you really started seeing psychology being used. Like you can go back and you can look at videos of TV and stuff when it was black and white, and everything was much more direct, because that's how people saw things. There wasn't a need for all these weird tricks to try to make people buy things. Sure, there were advertisements, but they were a lot less subtle in ways. It was kind of like, do you want the best? Do you love eating fresh food? Well, then buy bird's eye peas or whatever it was. Now there's lots of tricks behind nearly every commercial, to the point where they're literally designed to try to stick in your head as much as possible by making things either random, by making things very negative, by pushing humor in very grotesque and obscure ways. And I think freedom of expression is great, but when it's being taken advantage of and being swapped out with things that really are designed to entice and brainwash, there's a difference, and it's not really creativity at that point. That's kind of where it dies. That's kind of like art. I think it's like teaching art in college. It doesn't really make any sense if you think about it. That should be something that is either a hobby or something that you were naturally inclined to do. And if you want to learn how to do it, then that's something that you should probably pick up on the side to want to do. You shouldn't spend thousands and thousands of dollars and take these classes that are only going to put you in debt. And what did you really end up getting out of it? Something that's going to push your life that much further and advance you that much more? The only programs that are designed to do that are stuff for like media and media graphic arts, not the whole wide palette and array of artistic things that they even offer a lot of the times. Things like basket weaving and oil painting and things that you could just pick up by yourself. a lot of that is really just a waste. And I think it shows the skill level that a lot of people come out of school with, and they end up in debt, not really knowing how to do a lot of things in life. I think it's sad. I think it's unfortunate, and it kind of turns people into slaves and debt slaves. Most of the people who take classes that aren't really based in logical skills that can further your life, most of those people end up with nothing, and they end up being forced to get some menial job that, I mean, anybody without a degree could do just as easily. There's so much going on right now that takes people out of their element and puts them in another scenario where they end up dependent on other people, and other organizations. And that's one of the biggest problems that we're seeing here, and the acceleration of it. And to get back to the Tic Tac poster, it was, and this was, I think, a really clever, creative use of using those skills I just mentioned. This is where it all leads back into itself. The Tic Tac poster, and it was spelled out in Tic Tacs, and it said, the average person spends about 13 years or more watching TV in their life. And this was just a few years after I stopped watching TV, and it made me feel good, and it made me feel proud that I stopped watching TV, because it made me realize, hey, what are the things that I could accomplish in those 13 years that are usually taken away from other people just sitting down staring at a TV with moving images. It's like I could take that and the equivalent of 3 degrees, you know? It's like that's part of what even helped me motivate me to continue with my art, with my music skills, with just thinking, you know, philosophy, and putting my brain to use, you know, and using that brain power instead of sitting back and just watching screens, you know. I was the one who would hang out with all my friends, and I would, you know, everyone would be like, hey, let's go watch a movie, let's go rent a movie, let's go, you know, whatever. And I would be the only one going, why don't we just hang out and chill out and just talk about stuff and have awesome conversations and get our minds working. And of course, that was always the unpopular thing. And I'd usually be called an idiot, or stupid, or that's just dumb, or that's a waste of time, or something like that. Meanwhile, there really couldn't be much more value other than something like that. And sometimes now, you know, when I just speak about certain things and bring up certain topics, other people don't want to hear it. And I think often it's because they don't really know what to say along with it, because they've spent so much time absorbing into things that are completely irrelevant into their life and to anybody else's life. And I'm not saying, you know, that's always the case or always the scenario, but sometimes it's kind of like that. And it's kind of disappointing, because I really want to engage in thought-provoking activities. And I am thankful for, you know, something like this, and this medium, that I can kind of come out and speak my mind, and all of a sudden people I've never met before are kind of, you know, joining in the conversation and leaving comments and coming to me. I think this is a much more valued kind of way of media, you know, kind of like talk radio used to be, in a sense. You know, it gets your mind going, and your mind becomes so much more active than it would be if you're just sitting and watching a movie, especially if it's a movie that you've already seen a bunch of times, you know. And I won't lie, sometimes I do watch a movie and stuff, but it's usually older. It's usually not anything that was produced after the year 2000, because you see such a decline in so many artistic qualities of those movies back in the day. Everything is becoming so standard, whether it's the cinematography, or it's the actors or actresses, or how they look or present themselves. It's so much of a less unique thing now than it was, and the same kind of thing is happening with video games. And I do like playing video games because it's very interactive and it keeps your mind sharp in a lot of ways, you know. Um, Similar to music and art and stuff like that that you can always do on your own because it's extremely interactive. It burns so many calories in your mind, and it helps the imagination. You know, it's like when you're young. Uh, I really don't believe that people should be given iPads and stuff like that. I don't think it really helps as much as exercising your own mind. You know, if you want to exercise a child's mind, then you interact with them. You bring up topics, you talk about topics, and you give them physical toys so then they can embrace and build on their imagination. I think that's one of the big things too. It's when people are, especially young people, are just watching things and they're just watching these programs, literally called programs, and their imagination, you talk to them sometimes and they're often just repeating things that they've seen before, and they try to implement it, and as they get older it ends up being just another stereotypical thing that's been done before, as opposed to people who have very active imaginations. um, Through experience, I'm sure many people can agree with me, especially people from my generation and even older. When you're younger and you have, call them action figures or whatever it is, you can spend hours coming up with your own unique, brand new stories around all these people and different things, whether they're with like aliens or monsters or dinosaurs or just humans interacting, all these different things that exercise the mind and to build all these different scenarios that you would not have thought of otherwise. And it can easily be said to where the amount of input that people have from other people and influence is obvious. And the same people who say that video games don't influence people, music doesn't influence people, and movies and shows don't, are not being honest. They're not being honest with themselves. And you can absolutely program people to be violent. You can program people to be a lot of different things by just movies, music, and media and video games. All those things can be used, especially on a developing mind, because now the mind is taking that input and incorporating it into its growing pathways. And the associations that those pathways have with the external world are very much built upon the things that were inputted into their mind. And you can easily see it when it comes to like music, and particularly even like gangster rap music. It's 100% influential. What do you see young people doing? They literally try to dress like these people, mimic them in the way they talk, speak, and act, to the point where they're almost inadvertently becoming, clones of these people that they are told that are amazing. And it's even more, I guess, disturbing, to the point where you see a lot of these young people make themselves sound dumber, and they speak a lot dumber than they normally would otherwise, because they're literally missing vocabulary now and simplifying words and using ebonics, which originated from white people anyway, poor white people. So it's not even black culture. It's a culture that's being created specifically to make people less smart, less intelligent. And it's having an impact. And the same thing is true with shows and TV and even the food people eat. If you're not getting the right nutrients into your brain and into your body and into your mind, people are going to be sluggish. You can't live on McDonald's food. You can't survive eating only crap. Your body's going to turn to crap. And if your body turns to crap, then so does your mind, because what you are what you eat in so many ways, and what you do. And the people who are much more intelligent, who own corporations, know this. And they don't want super intelligent people out there. They want brainwashed zombie people that are going to continue doing what they want and making them money. They make money off of all this. They make money off people being dumb and buying the newest, hippest clothes, or spending their money on iPods and earbuds and anything that you can imagine, especially when it really doesn't add a quality of life to you. It really just keeps you in a trance-like state. And it's really important to know this, because they're using psychology and attacking the young to destroy families, to destroy the moral structure, to destroy anything that resembles a positive individuality, and that reinforces positive, strengthening bonds in the family to help create good teams. They don't want that. They don't want teamwork, because in the end, teamwork will be the end of them. And they just want people to be individual, depressed, hateful, drones, so then they can continue buying their products, thinking it's going to increase the value of their life, but it won't. The only way you can increase the value of your life is by increasing the value of inside yourself, because that's the only thing that you really have control over. You don't have control over the external surroundings all the time. Mostly it's all done with programming, and especially how far we've come in this society. You can see the decline in everything from like the years from 2000 and on. You know, sure, like quality of clarity on screens are becoming better, but what about the clarity of people's minds that are becoming foggier? And people seem to be so controlled by this, where if you start talking about it or mentioning it, they get personally offended, and they start trying to call you out and yell at you and call you names and say that you're the problem, you know, because now they take anything that's in their external world as a personal thing to them. So if you tell them that is bad, then they're going to say or think that you're calling them bad, and they're going to go into it even further. And that's kind of where it comes to reverse psychology too, where it's like the more you try to wake a lot of these people up, the more angry they're going to be. And that's kind of like what they touched on in the Matrix, you know. And it's so ironic in a lot of ways how even like the creators of like the Matrix ended up becoming captors of the Matrix that we live in today. The power of Hollywood and the power of television and movies and pop culture and music is destroying the youth all the time. And the same thing was true back in the 50s and 60s, and they say, oh, it's just uncool if you don't think that this is cool. Even the word cool was made back then. And a lot of the stuff that was happening then was just so different and edgy that there was a certain kind of attraction to it. And certain people knew that, and they took advantage of that so they can exploit the young and make them rebel further than they ever would have. And a lot of it did start back then. And I'm not going to lie, you know, there was so many things that I was into when I was growing up had a negative influence and impact on me, or at least inadvertently sent me down the wrong paths in a lot of ways. You know, it's like, as someone who's been in the entertainment business my whole life, I've seen the impact that entertainment has on people. It's undeniable, especially from someone who's lived through that entire experience, who's been doing it for 20 years. I see exactly how the influence has people, you know, to the point where people take drugs and go to shows and think that, you know, the DJs are the greatest people in the world, when they hardly do anything in all actuality. You know, I've hooked up for so many of these shows for DJs and stuff, and it's so pathetic. It's so insane And I understand the one aspect where people just want to get out and have fun and enjoy themselves. That's one thing. But when you start idolizing certain people to an extent where it becomes very, very harmful, uh, that's where the harm comes into play. That's where it becomes very distressful. And a lot of people don't realize, and it does add stress in people's lives because it's kind of like social media, you know? If there's people who feel like someone else is doing better than them, they get angry at them or they praise them. If it's someone they know, they get angry at them. If it's someone they don't know, then they start to idolize them. And that's another layer to psychology. You know, it's like I learned that too. It's like the people who don't know me have had such a bigger appreciation for my music and arts and talents than the people who do know me. The people who do know me, there's some sort of either envy or jealousy or whatever it is, and they end up hating you or they try to compete with you. And there's good competition too. There's positive competition, and that's when, you know, when you're like jamming out with somebody and playing music with someone, and they try to one up you and one up you, but they don't talk shit about you. You know, they just one up you and they one up you, and then you go back and forth, and that's how your skills increase and you become better musicians with each other and with other people. You know, that's called positive reinforcement. But there's so much negative in the world where, I mean, negative reinforcement, I guess you could say, but it's not really enforcing anything. It's more like tearing things down. And that's where, you know, the problem is. People are in such competition with each other and in such hateful modes because they feel distraught. They feel like their life isn't getting anywhere. They feel like everything is so negative and that the future is bleak. And they stop caring, and then they stop having the care or feel the need to be responsible in life and do what's good. And that's when things have this downward spiral, and it just kind of gets worse and worse. It's very upsetting, to say the least, because you could see the control that major corporations and even in the world of politics have been able to subdue the masses, and especially the young, inexperienced people. Because as much as young people think, you know, they're really ahead of things and know what's going down, and they feel like the older people don't know, it's actually quite the opposite. The older people are, the more they've experienced and the more they have seen the entire world change. They know what's going on more than young people. Young people like to think they do because they're told by a lot of these corporations and the media that they know better because it's the world for them. It's like, how long do you think some of these young people are going to live longer than me? Half of them probably not even as long because of how they take care of themselves. And people don't live so long. It's like, what, you're going to have a few more years in your life than I? It's like, you know, I'm in my 30s, but I think I look pretty healthy. I feel really healthy. Physically, I still feel like I'm young and able and strong. People's diets, in a lot of ways, if you keep your diet well, if you keep your mind well, exercised, you're going to probably have a long life. It's the people who feel so dire that get depressed, and then that depression runs through their body, and the stress gets to them, and it ages their bodies more, and they can't deal with things, and they start shutting things off mentally, and then physically things start getting shut off. It really is like mind over matter, and people know this. And if you have something over somebody's mind or intelligence or experience, then they're going to take advantage and exploit you as well. And they're going to use it all for their own gain, and they don't care about you. And it's the same thing with what's happening with this people that are young, that are just able to vote, are starting to, you know, vote for Biden, and they don't know his history. They don't realize his incredibly angry racial past. And what are they doing now that he's been elected? Now segregation is coming back in. It's like, and the kids think it's a good thing, and they start victimizing people, and they think it's a good thing because certain people deserve it for some reason. It's like, I thought these people had been just through the same stuff as you. Why are you saying that they have advantages and disadvantages? It's like a lot of that, you know, advantages and disadvantages exist, but to exploit it to the point of control is where things get out of hand, because now we're starting to see the acceleration of the decline of civilizations, families, and other things. The same way they're trying to brainwash and convince young people to be sexual, and I mean like kindergartners, and on Blue's Clues, the way that they try to push stuff, and kids shows where they try to talk about sex and sexuality, because they know it's brainwashing. One thing that they've been doing for a while now is using the most basic of instincts that humans have and take advantage of that, because people often forget that they're animals in this world, especially with everything that people are surrounded with. We're taken out of the natural environment, so now people are forgetting that they're part of the natural environment, and they think that they're these godlike entities that have control over their own personal lives, when it's really, a lot of it is just them being controlled. And it should be so alarming, especially for the fact that the younger the people are, the more oblivious they seem to be, and the more they think that they're part of this movement that's happening. Meanwhile, they're all being exploited to be pushed into the movement to help further the goals of the people who are exploiting them. It's all victimhood mentality, and it's all people creating the victimhood mentality while exploiting these people and turning them into the victims themselves. People really need to be aware of their environments, and they really need to be aware of what they're agreeing to and where they stand in reality, and to think deeply and say, is this what I want? How is this going to impact the future? And that's one of the things that a lot of people don't think about, especially the young people, but even a lot of people my age and even older. They forget that every single thing that you do in this world has an impact and will eventually impact other people, no matter what you choose to do. Everything is a chain reaction. And I think it's really important to remember that, and try to make the wisest decisions possible, which can benefit all people, not just yourselves or themselves or whatever it is. You know, sure, you have to put yourself first, but you also have to remember that we all live together, and we all live here together. And in order to give someone else the upper hand, sometimes you also gain an upper hand from where you were. And to give yourself an advantage, not take advantage. That's a difference as well. And I think it's really important to understand that. I mean, I could go on for hours and hours about psychology and how it's affecting people. And I'd really love to even do some live shows and some podcasts with people and start talking about this. Because, I mean, it's one thing for me to just speak to you guys through this screen, but I can't really get any feedback until I, read through the comments and stuff. And I'd really like to get some real-time feedback. In a few weeks, I'm going to have a good friend of mine, and also someone who's helped me kind of put some of the news together and worked on this page, and I believe he's going to be starting his own page. And I think we're going to have some discussions, and you'll kind of see us go back and forth a bit and kind of, describe things and talk about stuff. And there's lots of things that we have similar views on. But it's still always good to just have interactive conversations, because like I said, until I post this, it's very one-sided, and it's kind of me just, getting a lot of my thoughts out in the world, and hopefully that leaves some impact on people in a positive way, because that's really all I'm kind of hoping to do, I mean, in some way, I don't know, maybe this is some sort of like therapeutic thing where I get to, come on here and speak my mind and, kind of feel like I have my own show here. which I do have a couple other channels too. Um, but I think it's really better in the larger scope to have, you know, more and more people interact and have debates and stuff like that going on. So stay tuned to that, and I hope maybe I mean, a lot of people on here who follow my page and stuff are pretty smart people, and I think they get what's going on and understand what's going on. But sometimes it's good to hear it too, and it's good to speak. Um, so for now, I'll just leave it at that, and I'll be making more videos again. Um, so thanks for listening. I love all you guys. I love hearing the comments and a lot of the people in the comment section. Um, some people have left some really intriguing dialogue and questions in the comments that has even gotten me to think about stuff too, in a lot of ways and kind of outside my own box. And I really like that. So the more you guys interact, the better it is. The more intriguing it is for me to see that. So that's just a bit of psychology from a psychological or philosophical kind of point of view, or rant or whatever you want to call it. But I'll talk to you soon. Take care, and love you guys. Be well.